Cloud is a character that definitely takes the idea of being multifaceted to the next level. There is always something to uncover about his psyche, his motivations, and why he is the way he is. As a result, he takes that idea of the brooding character to levels that we really haven't seen before. And given the nature of how Final Fantasy VII is written and the way that you explore the characters within it, you actually get to peel back the exterior and see so much more of this character type than what you get in so many other stories. I wanted to examine Cloud as a character and do a brief character snapshot. I've done this same style video for Atifa and Aerith, and I felt it was time to finally examine our titular character of Final Fantasy VII. And then after the snapshot portion, I wanted to get into some recommendations for other stories you can check out if you really appreciate characters that are executed in the way that Cloud is. I want these videos to primarily be accessible even for people who haven't played through the entirety of the original game and thus maybe don't know everything there is to know about these characters. And Cloud is the most difficult character, oddly, I think, to talk about without revealing too much for people that don't know everything just yet. You would think some of the other characters it might be, but I feel really that a lot of what shocked me about Final Fantasy VII, the original, and the storytelling in this had come down to revelations about Cloud and things that Cloud realizes about himself. I had never really experienced plot reveals and twists the same way I had found in 7 before I played that game, and even now I don't see others like it. And Cloud is an enormous reason why. He's a character that is very much motivated by what he thinks he's supposed to be and the road that he decides he needs to be on. You see him constantly kind of trying to emulate those around him, but always feeling somewhat apart. And because of the nature of getting some flashbacks in the Final Fantasy VII story and getting to see Cloud as a child and then Cloud now and wondering what happened in between, you see him as this sort of loner young boy who really wasn't cool, calm, collected, and brooding like he is in modern day. And when you do get glimpses of him as his time as a soldier, you don't really see that side either. You would think initially that it was his time as a soldier that shaped him into this type, but then you see him and you're wondering, well, that doesn't really feel like modern Cloud, so I still feel a little bit left in the dark as to why he is like this now when he wasn't like this before. And what's fun when you have people that are coming to the story new, they have a lot of theories, and it's really fun to explore what those theories are, and the rest of us can be those really obnoxious fans that are just like, I know. But so much of Cloud comes down to memory and the desire to be something. And I think a lot of people can really resonate with him as a character, as so many individuals growing up, they feel that way. They don't feel like they belong. They see people that they care about, and they might even have friends who care about them, but it just doesn't seem like it comes naturally. It doesn't seem as though you've got it quite figured out the way everybody else has it figured out. And thus you look for things on the outside that you can bring to who you are so that you can finally feel like you fit in. You finally feel like you have a place, and you can even go beyond that and become somebody to be admired and respected, maybe even feared to some degree, and that you can be useful. Memory has a lot to do in shaping Cloud as well. In present day, he seems very much like he has lost himself, even though you look at him and you're like, isn't this what you always wanted to be? Haven't you accomplished that? Why now do you suddenly feel like you don't know who you are? Memory is something that can be so easily distorted. It makes you question, is our narrator reliable? Is he able to perceive things around him accurately? And the concept of an unreliable narrator is one that we've also seen before, similar to the brooding character. I don't know how often we see unreliable character and brooding main character combined. I think that in and of itself is kind of unique. If anything, I think unreliable narrator of the types that are typically much more filled with hubris and are the showman. I think a lot of times people point to Kvothe from The Name of the Wind, which is a very popular fantasy series, as a great example of an unreliable narrator. They are this amazing figure. Let me tell you all of my accomplishments, and it leaves you wondering, did you actually do all those things? Did that play out the way you're saying it played out? Are you as marvelous as you are claiming? And Cloud kind of defies that, which I think is really cool and a really interesting approach. He is somebody who seems as though he has no desire to express or to care about others, but then you're seeing there is a softer side, there is a sweet side, a kind of oblivious side to some degree at times, and there is maybe somebody who's a little bit silly deep down. If you dig really a lot, you'll find that he's actually very caring and compassionate, even though he seems like he acts as though he doesn't care about anything outwardly. However, the unreliable narrator aspect of the story makes you constantly fear for Cloud, wonder what's in store for him, and it just creates this level of suspense and mystery around his character. And it's those things that I wanted to pull apart and really look at when trying to figure out some good recommendations for if you really like a lot of these elements to his character. And so we're going to segue now into the recommendation portion of this video. I'm not sure I've read too many other books that do the concept of memory and how it can be altered and how it can shape not only the character's sense of reality, but yours as well as somebody who is following them through their journey than The Last Tale of the Flower Bride. This story takes that concept to a new level. For so long while I was reading this, I questioned, is there even magic in this, or is this all in the character's mind and thus it's in my mind? If you don't know, the setup for the story is very abstract and quite surreal, which I think is fitting for stories that are done in this fashion, but you are following a young man who becomes enthralled, infatuated with this very strange, alluring woman. And she has a mysterious past, and she agrees to be his wife so long as he doesn't ask about it. However, due to some circumstances involving the health of some of her family members, it is becoming more and more difficult to honor that vow, as he and his wife now go back to the home she grew up in, and there seems to be a lot of mysteries surrounding the house, her past, and the people that are in her life or were in her life. And so much of his trauma in his childhood affects why he's so captured by this woman and why the idea of fairy tales and magic are so appealing to him, almost like he wants to believe in something magical as a result of something that happened to him in his past. And so you're exploring that, and I truly, when I got to the end of it, even though the story seems as though it's more so focused on his wife, I think it was his story that really captured me. And I think that it was actually pretty brilliant the way in which we are building from the framework of common fairy tales and tropes that we see in those stories. We're building from there to dissect trauma and the way it affects the mind. And does that not scream Cloud in so many ways? I just think that while the stories themselves and the plots of Final Fantasy VII and The Last Tale of the Flower Bride are completely different, that aspect of memory and how it affects you and impacts your ability to discern truth and reality from things that are fictional, I think that there aren't too many things that mirror that with Cloud better than this story. I'll get to a couple other stories that definitely look into memory and having holes in your past, but I wanted to go back to the idea of Cloud being a character who feels like there is a role he's supposed to fulfill. There's this certain person he's meant to become, and really zero in on that, as there's a couple of stories that I think do that really well. And I'm kind of double dipping, I guess you could say, because I recommended this in the Tifa video as well, but I'm gonna mention once again Vagabond. I have a whole in-depth review, non-spoiler, if you are interested in hearing more about Vagabond. But this follows a real person in history, Musashi, who became the greatest warrior under the sun, basically. And he was known for being this incredible fighter, having prowess like no one else. However, his journey to becoming this person was filled with so much violence and mishaps along the way. This is, of course, a fictional account of that individual, so there are going to be things that are embellished, and there are going to be things that are maybe heightened, that were maybe not quite so intense. However, a lot of the themes of what it means to be the best, to be a warrior, to be a protector, a lot of that is dissected throughout this story. It's really, really well done. The art is incredible. But I think Cloud, you see him stumble a little bit, and you see him wanting to become a certain kind of person, and that idea is really the focus in a lot of ways of Vagabond. It's not the only thing, of course. There's a lot of things that we explore here, but just this idea of a character being motivated so strongly by this sort of outside idea of what you're meant to be and what it means to be strong. I think that that's something that Musashi and Cloud definitely have in common. And then the next one, it's a little bit different, and that would be Shadow of the Fox. So this story is very much rooted in Japanese folklore, and so you're going to see a lot of monsters in this that are truly frightening, and if you have a lot of knowledge of Japan, I think you're going to really appreciate a lot of the monsters that appear in this. But the setup for the story is you follow two main perspectives. One who is a very flippant, silly girl who has been raised by monks, and she has been tasked with protecting this piece of a very significant, important scroll. Then you have our other character, whose name is Tatsumi, who is tasked with retrieving this scroll. And the other character manages to trick him into believing she knows where the scroll is, but that she doesn't actually possess it, and that she'll give it to him if he accompanies her to this place. And she does this because she really needs to go to this other place, so she figures, I might as well have this guy protecting me in the meantime, as opposed to being my enemy and pursuing me. So she tricks him in that way, and then they band together to go to this certain place. And there's a lot of other people that are after the scroll, so Tatsumi inevitably ends up protecting Yumeko, who is the character that is involved with trickery. Tatsumi is the character that I wanted to focus on here and have the comparison to Cloud. Tatsumi has the brooding character type, and in a lot of ways the beginning of Tatsumi's arc reminds me kind of the opening of Final Fantasy VII, of the merc who shows up and he's just here to do the job. He does what he's told to do, he gets his money, and he goes. He doesn't care about anything. And we know that's not true. We know Cloud definitely, certainly has a lot of things he cares about, but that is the character you're presented with initially, and I think that's true of Tatsumi. And then there is this wrestling with what feels like this outside power that is forcing you towards something. I think we definitely explore that in Final Fantasy VII, and then in the Shadow of the Fox trilogy as a whole, you will kind of have to push through to get to some of these parallels. But I definitely think Tatsumi is pushed forward through things that are somewhat outside of his control. He doesn't always have the ability to act of his own free will. But then you see these characters care very much about those around them. In some ways, I think Yumeko is a little bit like Aerith, actually. Though I'm not saying I think that the relationship between Yumeko and Tatsumi is the same as Cloud and Aerith, but I do think that there is this sort of soft spot for that lighthearted, silly, it's seemingly carefree character, but actually there's a lot more beneath the surface. There is this sort of lingering loneliness with them. So I think there's some parallels there, but again, not saying they're exactly the same. But I do think that if you like that aspect of Cloud's character, that this trilogy might be a lot of fun for you, even though the plots are completely different from one another. Returning to the memory part of this, I wanted to highlight The Bone Shard Daughter by Andrea Stewart. This is a series that I hype up quite often. This first book in particular really took me by surprise. And I always talk about it being a genre bender, as it feels certainly like fantasy, but it also feels like it has leanings of science fiction and horror as well. So the setup is that you are following a number of characters. I'm going to specifically highlight our main character, Lynn. She is somebody who has holes in her memory, and they play a really big part in her current everyday life as she is next in line to become emperor. But because of the holes in her memory, she doesn't know how to use the magic, and the magic is what keeps pretty much the whole empire in check. There are these beings known as constructs, and it is important that she knows how to manipulate and code, you could almost say, these beings, as they are what makes the empire function. And so she's trying to gain memories about that, but she's also trying to gain back her memories from her childhood, and those seem to be the most elusive, but perhaps the most revealing as to what's actually going on in her environment, because her environment itself seems very odd as well, and that's where kind of the mystery... Actually, I said horror and sci-fi, but there's mystery elements as well. It's truly so much of a genre bender, and I think if you like that constant, like, what the heck is going on feeling, then The Bone Shard Daughter, I can't recommend enough. I'm also trying not to say too much about that one, because part of what makes it so great is the discovery portion. Then last for today, this one, in my opinion, is maybe the least obvious, but when I really think about it, I actually think there's quite a lot that these characters share, and that would be the Shades of Magic series by V.E. Schwab, specifically the main character, Kel. I think Kel has more in common with Cloud than I realized until I actually sat and thought about it. I'm like, they're pretty similar characters. So Kel is somebody who is currently serving his adoptive family. There is the king and queen of what is referred to as Red London. If you don't know, in Shades of Magic, this main character, Kel, has the ability to go between parallel worlds. And in his world, which is Red London, he has, well, I should clarify, he lives in Red London. That's a city, and he's able to go between Londons specifically. That's where the portal is between each of the worlds. The world is not called Red London. But anyway, so he lives in Red London. He serves its king and queen, who are essentially his parents. And then their son is essentially his brother. But Kel has always had this feeling of, I'm not quite part of the family, but I'm also not really free to do what I want either. So he has obligations toward this family. In some ways he acts like their son, but in some ways he's kind of their slave, because he has to do their bidding, and they don't really use language that is cruel, but the reality of his situation is made clear to him. He also knows that they likely have ideas of what occurred in his past and how he ended up in their care, and that they probably know but aren't willing to reveal that information to him, and he can't really ask. So he has holes in his memories. Even the name Kel isn't necessarily his real name. So he doesn't know much about his past, his childhood, but he always feels like he cares very much about these people, and he wants to be a part of the family, but he always feels like he's slightly separated. And I think that feeling is something that Cloud experiences as well. And something that's beautiful about both of these characters and their arcs throughout their respective stories is that they do start to actually feel welcomed, and like there is this sense of found family with the people in their lives. And so in that way, I think Cloud and Kel both kind of are a little brooding, and there's maybe some hidden charm beneath all of the tough exterior. There's certainly a heart, but they're a little moody. And I think that at first you're kind of like, all right, come on, like, cheer up a bit. But you kind of can't resist liking that that is their moody self, you know? They can't really come away from it for too long. And I think that their personalities and some of the aspects of their pasts are somewhat similar as well. There's a hint of memory for both of them, and then there is a hint of not feeling like they belong, what they're supposed to be, the roles they're supposed to fill. I think there's some parallels in general. But that's it for some recommendations and also just a little brief snapshot and character study of Cloud. I'm very curious, based off of the things that I was highlighting, what are some other stories or characters that you would recommend people check out? And then also, was there anything else in addition to what I said about Cloud that you wanted to mention? If you want to get into spoilers, just make sure you write spoiler in your comment and then enter, so that way anybody who comes to this who doesn't know the whole picture just yet doesn't have anything ruined for them. But anyway, thanks so much for watching. If you're interested in any of these stories, I'll have them linked in the description bar. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you later. Bye.